Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. Oh, all right. Yes. Giving thanks for another day and another opportunity to connect with an incredible being who is a force in the world of love and healing heartbreak and masculinity and femininity and, bringing these two powerful energies together so that we can really create an empowered, amazing, connected world for ourselves and each other and our children and our grandchildren and the generations to come. Well, we also heal for the generations in the past who've already left us, and just taking a moment here to turn our gaze inward and notice our bodies, notice our breath, and just really grateful to be here with you today, Suki, and just asking for whatever is needed to be received by the community, by anyone who will ever hear this podcast, for it to be received easily and gracefully, and for us to be the clear channels that we are, for it to come through us with ease and grace. And let's take 3 nice big deep belly breaths in together. Take a nice big deep breath in. And out. And in. And out. And in. And out. Oh, yeah. Yes.
That's great.
All right. Ignite Intimacy community, welcome to another episode on the Love Hotline. We've got someone really special here with us today. We've got an author, coach, divine, feminine, masculine warrioress in the world. Suki Sohn is joining us today. What's going on, Suki?
It's great to be here, Sarah. It's a beautiful day here, enjoying the spring weather at last. I'm really happy and honored to be sharing my thoughts and insights with your audience.
Yeah, we are too. And a woman to springtime. New York is blossoming everywhere. And
exactly.
It's so gorgeous. And it's just like a huge uplift to the mind, heart, body, soul experience right now. So yeah, I'm also feeling really grateful for this. And yeah, so you and I met a couple of weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, at combined dinner. Peter had, from Los Angeles via Germany, I had run into him totally synchronistically at the assemblage here in New York City. And I was actually going to a different event, but I walked into the event that he was going to be contributing to. And it was just so funny because I saw his headsets. He does like these, headset meditations and where you actually put headphones on and he leads you through this whole experience. And I saw them sitting on the table and I was like, is Peter here? And then I saw him, I was like, yes, what is up? So he invited some people out to dinner the next night and I joined them. And that's where I met Suki and her amazing husband. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was a great evening. And I hadn't seen Peter in a while, so it was really nice to catch up with him. He's been doing some really great stuff out in LA with his meditation practices and leading a community out there. So it's great.
It really is. And it was interesting because, and this is Peter Opperman, who we're talking about for those of you who know him or don't know him. And he has a company called futureselfmethod.com if you want to check that out. And so I had first had a long conversation with your husband, which was very interesting. And it was like, it's just funny because since I I've always been interested in sexuality and intimacy and, and since I started the podcast though, it's like people just naturally talk to me about this stuff without even knowing that I do this podcast. And
Yeah.
so it just like really naturally came up in my conversation with your husband. And he was just sharing with me about some people that he knows in the space and some different things that are going on. And so I was like, okay, I'm totally not surprised that you're talking to me about this right now. And then I had the pleasure of talking with you. Yes. And it was like, oh, wow, you work in this whole space. And, you were sharing about your book, your first book, Happily Ever After, and, supporting people with healing from heartbreak and all of that.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. Let's, give us the backstory. Like, I know you come from a very corporate background, big Fortune 100 companies, finance, which I'm out to shift the conversation around male dominated. Like, I actually believe we should just we need to stop using that term altogether because, people may think that finance is a, in quotes, air quotes over here, male dominated industry. And I actually beg to differ because I know quite a few women who are in the finance world. So I'm just out to shift the conversation around that. And with all that said, there are a lot of men in finance and it can tend to be looked at as this very like masculine, aggressive, industries. So bring us back and tell us a little bit about your journey before you had this awakening and this breakthrough and wrote this book and started doing your coaching work. What brought you up to this?
Sure. So dialing back almost now 20 years, I started out in investment banking right out of college. It was kind of the thing to do, it was a prestigious thing to do. So I paid well. So I decided to join the bandwagon. At the time, this was kind of in the 90s where I was really experiencing the heydays in Wall Street. So that's where my career started. And after a few years in banking, I had decided to move into media and was doing strategic ventures and business development, business school, kind of a pretty standard track, if you ask me. And then after business school, I went to work at Walt Disney Company, again, doing strategic ventures and business development for several years, and then back into finance again. So throughout my career, it's been a pretty corporate track, and whatever I deemed as to be success, I kind of followed. Coming from a conservative Asian family, I played piano when I was growing up, did the whole MBA track, and my idea of where I wanted to be was pretty fixed from pretty early on. And then I got married pretty early in my mid-20s. I met a man who I thought was absolutely my dream guy, Mr. Right. He was beautiful, 6'3", blue-green eyes, half British, half Korean, and very intelligent, went to Oxford. He kind of basically ticked the box of everything that I thought was Mr. Right. But unfortunately, our marriage didn't work out. And I actually go into a lot about in more detail in my book, Happily Ever After, of kind of my journey of my dreams basically being shattered. Everything that I worked hard for, everything that meant a lot to me, everything I deemed to be success was just, the rug was pulled out from underneath me. And my identity was a little bit in question as to who am I, what do I want? So after going through a pretty painful divorce with my first husband, what had happened is I found out a few months after giving birth to our first son that he had been cheating on me for over a year.
Wow.
So basically before, during, and after my pregnancy. Yeah. So it was a pretty painful experience, and I just felt like I was living a lie because on the surface, it looked like I had the perfect life. And, I had friends and family even saying, you have the perfect life, just take a lover.
Wow. But, which right, like people have open marriages and open relationships and that totally works for some people.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
like, well, it's not like you guys had an agreement and this was happening. And then it's like, oh, just cover it up. Just, brush it under the rug,
Exactly. And, I think for some people it works. And, in a way with my first husband, we were a good team. We were a power couple, if you want, call it that. And so I know that's for some folks that works, but for me at the time, it didn't. Like I wanted true intimacy. I want somebody who was going to be my life partner and, shared my deepest secrets and whatnot. So I say I was too young to give up on love, or what I thought was love at that point. So I packed my bag and I actually quit my job at Disney, and I left. At that time I was living in Hong Kong. Disney didn't want to let me go. So they actually kept my job for 6 months. And finally, after 6 months, I told them, look, guys, I'm not coming back. But that started my spiritual journey. Before then, I pretty much had I would call myself pretty materialistic, although some curiosity in my my zodiac and astrology from time to time. But I had really no interest in meditation, mindfulness, or any kind of spiritual practices. And after this, I came to New York City and I met another guy pretty quickly who was actually a celebrity chef. And at that time, my alarm bells were ringing, going, no, this is not the right guy. He's like, but I thought, you know what? I was in this miserable marriage, heartbreak. I deserve a break. I'm going to have fun. So, putting all warnings aside, I'm like, it's just going to be like a fun couple of months and it's going to be fine. Of course, it didn't turn out that way.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. 3-year long relationship. We got engaged. He had 3 kids from a former marriage. Our families got blended. And of course, at the end of 3 years, I went through the same story where I found out that he was cheating on me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
At this point we had moved in together. And this time one of my friends said, oh, I just met a girlfriend. And she said that she just had lunch with somebody who claims to be your fiance's girlfriend. I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. And this was actually my second cousin. So anyway, that's basically, I was like, okay, well, I'm done here. I'm moving. And that led me down sort of a deep, dark night of the soul. And I did some soul searching. I headed out to Sedona, met with a whole bunch of healers. Mind you, at this time, I was still very much in the business world, as actually at that time as a business development consultant. And shortly after, I joined a hedge fund, Fortress. So still my mindset was very much kind of goal oriented and my idea of what success was and what I needed to do in life was still very firmly anchored in those kind of past beliefs that I had. But during this process of going through that heartbreak the second time around, and I dare say that even though we weren't married and we were just engaged, that second time, that heartbreak really kind of destroyed me. I actually, one of the other things that actually led to the whole demise of that relationship, in hindsight, I know, is that I actually had gotten pregnant. And then he was just not stable and I couldn't trust him. So I decided to get an abortion pretty late.
Oh my God.
That shattered me. And then I think at that point, I know that I really never forgiven myself or him for the situation. And that's where the relationship started unraveling, which led to him probably, finding intimacy elsewhere and us splitting up again. So that's kind of my long story of the heartbreaks that I went through. And my book, Happily Ever After, is, talks about my journey as well as my insights into overcoming the heartbreak that I went through to become whole again and picking up the pieces.
Yeah. And it's, love and the journey and the warning signs and whatever it is in us that doesn't allow us to listen and take heed to what's actually being presented. And I had a situation where I fell for a man that was much older than me and ended up, at the very tail end of a very tumultuous 3-year on and off, blah, 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 getting pregnant.
Yeah.
And the whole experience just completely shattered me. And I remember being in the clinic and my girlfriend was there with me and she was just like, and I was about to run out of there. And she was like, do you want to be connected to this man for the rest of your life? Yeah. And have to deal with him. And I was just like, I was just like, no, but it was like the most heartbreaking thing. Cause it was anyways, it was a really powerful experience that I know that I didn't need to go through that,
Mm-hmm.
all of that to get what
Yeah.
I got out of it. However, that's how it happened. And what I
Yeah.
got is
Mm-hmm.
it brought me home to myself. It brought me home
Exactly.
to my daughter, who was 8 at the time. And it
Mm-hmm.
brought me home to like the journey of self-love, which was something I knew nothing about whatsoever.
Exactly. 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 Very similar. I remember my day in the clinic too. I was crying the entire time. And I remember the nurse wiping my tears away with her latex gloved hands and saying, don't do
Mm.
this to yourself. But yeah, it was my soul. Because, especially after having been a mother,
Oh, yeah.
you know what that all means, just there's life inside of you. So yeah, I felt like my soul was
Oh,
ripped apart.
yep, yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of my journey to wholeness, to self-love,
Mm,
I should say,
mm-hmm.
self-compassion. And that's what prompted me to write my book was actually, I was asked to share my story. A friend of mine does this great storytelling events called Stand Up for Passion. And
Cool.
yeah, yeah, it's a great event. It's now kind of international. I think they do in Japan and Europe and in the multiple cities in the US. And he asked me to come speak at one of his events. So he said, talk about what you're passionate about. At that time, I was in finance. I'm like, I really don't know what I'm passionate about. So,
Mm,
so I said, I'll just talk about my personal passions, my love story. And so that's what kind of led to this. And the little short topic of the title of my little speech was The Banker, the Chef, and the Healer. So that's my journey.
mm,
And yeah, so that led to me writing this book, which is kind of step by step lays out the process that we need to go to release the heartbreak and all the emotion and the drama that underlies it so that we can actually open ourselves up to true love again.
mm,
What happens is after you go through heartbreak, you kind of put on colored glasses and you develop all these belief systems and patterns that you're not even aware of.
mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
this kind of book kind of walks you through what some of those pitfalls could be, starting from understanding who you are. I actually have this assessment where I walk people through what their natural elements are based on, the natural 5 element theory across the world. So fire, water, earth, air, and what I call spirit, as well as the Chinese system, which includes wood and metal. So depending on what your natural element is, you have specific tendencies. Like, for example, if you're a metal type of person, you're highly intellectual, you're very head-based. So you'll make decisions based on logic and reason instead of listening to your heart. Some people who have a strong fire element, for example, would be very impulsive and they're very physical. So they often mistake lust for love.
Mm.
So each of what I created this kind of this 7 element system, combining all the different element theories of the world and kind of taking a look at what your natural tendencies are and what your default patterns are and starting from there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And
So,
it's interesting that you talk about that. So clearly, Ignite Intimacy, our people, we are talking about healing from heartbreak right now. And
yeah.
it's something that we can all relate to heartbreak. Like, I don't know if there's a human being in the world
Yeah.
who hasn't felt some level of heartbreak. And it's like seeing it in terms of something that's actually a really powerful force to cracking us open. Like, what I've gotten over the years is that it's okay to have a breakdown. Like, it's okay to
Yeah.
crack open, right?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
heartbreak, it actually like gets to the heart of the matter and it gets to what's under there that's not being dealt with.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, there's a great quote by Alan Watts, who I'm a huge fan of, that he says, "A mind which will not melt with sorrow or love is a mind which will all too easily break."
Mm.
And in a way, I think my first husband was a little bit like that. And you see this especially in men who are unable to express their emotions or really even be in touch with their emotions. If you're not able to sort of live life to the fullest and experience the sorrow and the joys, you really are a living corpse anyway.
Mm.
Or at some point you just kind of snap and break. and you just really all fall apart, which for some people, that's a journey that that they have to endure and go through to take them to the next level. But what you were saying about this falling apart, and it's okay to fall apart, and it's just part of life. I agree. I agree with that. But at the same time, I think that there are a couple of, learning from what has happened in the past and putting those lessons in place so that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. I see many of my clients actually repeat the same mistakes over and over again. In fact, I went through that too. Like when I met the chef, my girlfriends who met him said, "Oh my God, he's so much like your ex-husband." I'm like, "What do you mean he's like my ex-husband? He doesn't look anything like him. He doesn't act like it. He's totally different." But of course, he was exactly the same guy in a different package, right? So I feel like there's definitely needs to be permission and allowance for that unraveling. But at the same time, having the mindfulness to actually learn from our lessons so that hopefully we repeat our patterns a little less.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is like, there's this guidance system within us that is really speaking to us loud and clear. And I know for myself, I listen when I want to, and then I ignore it when I want to.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one responsible for that.
Right.
I can't blame my sister, friend, mother for, not telling me or holding me accountable or whatever. It's like, that was my choice. And, right now there's someone very close to me in my world that keeps choosing a relationship that myself and many other people in her world know is not good, powerful relationship for her.
Yeah.
And we also know what it's like to be 20.
Yeah.
And to think you know it all, and to, and to judge others and to, push people away. And so it's like, I'm really in that experience right now where it's like, we are all resourceful, empowered, whole, complete, perfect beings. And I'm committed to holding her as such. And
I think we all go through that period where we're attracted to the bad boy.
Absolutely.
There's something sexy and attracted to the bad boy.
Well, and it's interesting because Esther Perel has this amazing podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it at all. It's, I believe it's called Where Should We Start? And she does one-off coaching couples, audio coaching sessions with couples. So it's like relationship and sex therapy. And I listened to this one this week about this couple who is just really hitting a wall with sexual intimacy in their relationship. However, the man, they both come from an acting background, and the man started bringing out this character, this like Jacques or Jean-Claude or something. And he's this French character, and the man speaks French. So like when this French character comes out, he is a completely different person. And it was so powerful to experience the power of role play.
Yeah.
And what that gives you access to. And how like when he is, let's just say he's Jean-Claude. When he is Jean-Claude, it's like he is confident and he's the bad boy and he's the, and it's like there's this turn on and this connection in the relationship when that energy comes out of him.
Yeah.
And, Esther was like, there's nothing wrong with this relationship. Like, you do not need to be thinking about divorce or anything like that. Like, there's nothing wrong with this relation. Everything is here. Yeah. You just need to access it and do the healing, whatever, like work with healing, whatever else is there. But it's like, this is here and it's a tool and it's something that's opening up something new.
I personally love role play and bringing fantasy and imagination into the relationship. And I think it's also amazing process for healing as well. One of my daily practices is actually a Vajrayana tantric Buddhist practice where you visualize yourself being the goddess or a Tara, green Tara, or whatever your choice of Tara is. And so you become empowered like the goddess. And it's actually a very powerful practice. So whether you do that in a role play situation, within a relationship, which can bring a lot of sort of fun and sexiness into, and some variety, right? Now you're sleeping with somebody else into the relationship. And also as a self-healing practice as well, to imagine yourself and to embody a deity or a model, somebody that you find, amazing or that you respect very much. So,
yeah, absolutely. I love that. And so, if people aren't familiar with what we're talking about, are there any resources that you could point our audience to, or for role play?
For role play, couples role play, I mean, that to me is really all about your own personal imagination. One of the things that I find tricky with regards to intimacy and sex is that everybody is so different. Like one thing that, one technique or tool or workshop that lights somebody up would just completely shut down another person, depending on their level of, ability to go wild or not or whatnot. So I think it's like really about finding that space with you and your lover first, and what's permissible and what's not. And I think that for me, intimacy and really being sexy and really being able to push the boundaries, the first thing, in my opinion, it has to be trust within the two people. Because when that foundation is there, then you really can go a little crazy. You can do a little, things that may make you feel a little uncomfortable. But I find that in a lot of relationships, people are trying to push those boundaries before there's actually a firm, solid ground in trust.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you need that trust there. If the trust isn't there, it could all fall apart really quickly.
Exactly. And in terms of role play, like even that, some people love fantasy and some people think it's tacky. So I think it really depends on the couple to what works for them and what doesn't. I feel like there's no paradigm. And, instead of, let's say, finding a sexual intimacy workshop that works on role play, is to really have open conversations and build that foundation of trust between yourself and your lover. And actually, what my book and what my kind of philosophy is about this is that you can't really develop trust with another human being if you don't trust yourself.
That's right.
So, and the same thing with love. You can't really love another if you don't love yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so I'm thinking about, because we have some other juicy topics that we want to talk about. So I'm curious, can you give us just dip into the steps to healing heartbreak?
Sure, I'd love to. So first is understand yourself. Know thyself, Socrates said. So mind your limits. So understand what your tendencies are. Are you the type of an impulsive nature who is, ready to jump into bed, perhaps prematurely, and understand those patterns within yourself? That's kind of like my first step. And then the second step would be acknowledging the rejections, resentment, and regrets in your past and the impact that it had on yourself and your belief system and how you view the world. To clear any sense of these, I call it the 3 R's, rejection, resentment, regret, is crucial to be able to have a healthy relationship in the future. After my whole 2 terrible heartbreaks, I was dating this guy and he said to me, I will move mountains to try to win your heart, but I can't fight a ghost from your past.
Boom.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, whoa, that was like an epiphany moment for me. And so I think what we're doing is we're making guys in our lives or, our lovers fight ghosts from the past. We're not in the moment. We're not giving a fresh new chance to somebody. We're carrying all our baggage into the relationship. So, one of the first steps that I feel like anybody who's really wanting to have love in their lives is to take out your own garbage first. Take out any belief systems or patterns that you've developed from feeling rejected. Because then your defense mechanisms go up and you start snapping and, do things that are irrational. Right? Or, regret. I know clients who I work with that they had such regret. For example, they cheated on somebody, but they really loved them and they regretted it. And so now they feel like they don't deserve love. Those kind of things. These are all things that color our view of ourselves and our ability to actually attract love into our lives and heal from them. So that's step 2. Then I talk about greeting your inner demons. When we feel like we had something to hide, that's when we get shy. That's when we don't show up as the most radiant and brilliant self that we can be. Some people call it shadow work. And in my process, it's not about like doing away with your shadow, but actually really embracing your shadow or what, some call inner demons, embracing your inner demons and transforming them to be your best allies. Because those shadows will never go away. But if you know how to work with them and embrace them, you can turn them into your greatest strength.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Then I go into the processes with the body, navigating and nourishing your body, understanding and being really comfortable in your body. A lot of, because of all the social images around, a lot of women do not feel comfortable in their own body. To be able to step in and really love your body. Part of that practice is literally hug yourself and say, I love my body, and really appreciate everything your body does. So, going through a whole education of learning how to navigate and nourish your body. Then I go into educating the difference between men and women. Women and men are different. There's no ifs and buts about it. Our brains are wired differently. Our hormones are different. We go through different cycles. So oftentimes I see that women want their men to be their best girlfriend. It's never going to happen.
And it's like there's so much pressure we put on relationships.
Yeah.
Assuming that the relationship is going to hold everything that we could possibly need.
Exactly. So, and that's like, men are not hairy women. They have their own needs that are different from ours. So I think, again, going back to self-love and, what Virginia Woolf calls a room of your own, like to have selfhood in this and being able to relate to a man as he is instead of expecting him to be understanding and somehow psychically know everything we want. Women make that mistake often. Whereas men, like I often hear guys say like, why can't she just tell me what she wants?
Well, yeah, it's this big assumption that men are just, or our partners, whoever it is, men, women, whoever, that they're just going to know what I want and how I want it. And that's not true. It's like for me and for all of us getting more clear about what we want. I actually just had a conversation with a man about this last night, and he was like, the more that women can just like, and men can embody like what they want and actually ask for it.
Right. Without charge.
Yeah. Without charge from nothing, from just like, from like a juicy place, from an inviting place. It creates so much space for yumminess and connection and, that which we can't even imagine is possible.
Right. Exactly. That again, we talked about this already, but goes back into your relationship with yourself, being completely comfortable with who you are and what you are, and to be able to ask for your needs clearly. And actually, and if those needs cannot be met, still being okay with that instead of the wall falling apart because, your lover, boyfriend, husband can't deliver on what that is.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that. And then, we talked about yumminess and juiciness. Like there is David Jada. I don't know if you know him. He's kind of a relationship and sex expert. He wrote a book called The Way of the Superior Man. And when I first read this book, I was like, this book is so sexist. I can't believe it. And then when I actually took a step back and read it the second time around, I was like, you know what? A lot of what he says is true. And there is definitely this difference between men and women. And like, you can fight it all you want, but in order to create sexiness and intimacy and passion, there has to be a polarity, right? There has to be a positive and negative pole. There has to be somebody who receives and somebody who gives. Now, this relationship can be fluid once you're in a committed relationship and you're intimate and you can kind of push the boundaries a little bit. But men, by nature, the masculine natures, they want to be the giving. Physiologically, a man has a penis, and a woman has a vagina. Vagina, it receives. So from that sense, there, you have to create this polarity, and that's where I call it tempting and teasing. There is so much power in being magnetic and being receptive. And I think like women don't understand it in this modern day and age. Being alluring to get what you want instead of like having to push and grasp for what you want. Like, for example, I love the analogy of using a spider. A spider, she builds her web in a place where just a breeze can bring her prey to her, and she just sits there and waits, and things come to her.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, right now, I think a lot of modern women, they're conditioned because society conditions to like, go get what you want, be go-getter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that just brings that into relationships as well, which, talk to any guy, most guys will say they find it a bit of a turnoff when a woman's too graspy.
Oh, of course.
Grabby.
Yes.
Yeah. So learning that game, I hate to use the word game, but learning that a path of being able to be alluring and tempt and tease your way to get what you want instead of necessarily directly taking action to get it.
Absolutely. Well, and so this is powerful stuff. And I think it's something that many of us are aware of, right? And so because we wanted to dive into, what it means to be a woman in this day and age and the Me Too movement. And just like, there are a lot of very angry and vindictive women and men out there. And, but we're going to focus this conversation more on women.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what does it mean to be a woman in this day and age when you're, powerful and out in the world and you're wanting to be fully expressed and you want to wear what you want to wear, you want to have the sexual partners that you want to have. Yeah. And, let's dive into that a bit.
Mm-hmm. So the way I define femininity, I don't define it by any, let's say, social norm. But I guess I come from more of a psycho-spiritual aspect, looking at spiritual traditions around the world, especially like Taoism, about like the aspect of yin and yang, right? So within us, we both have the masculine and feminine. But as you said, we're going to focus on women. So we all have the masculine aspect. What had happened in modern day and age is because school systems, our jobs all encourage more of the masculine traits to be cultivated and developed, and we're rewarded for it. That's kind of overdeveloped. Whereas the feminine traits are kind of considered wishy-washy, too emotional, irrational, all sorts of things like this, where there's amazing power on, quote unquote, the feminine aspect, right? From a yin-yang perspective, the feminine aspect. So let me just kind of talk a little bit about what, in my opinion, those are. One is fluidity. Women generally physically are more flexible, but also in their mind. And this comes from, generations and generations in tribal societies where a woman's livelihood depended on being able to be, liked in a community, because men go out and hunt and they develop certain traits to be the way they are. But women generally had to be in a collaborative situation where they kind of did the child rearing together and did things around the village together. So the token of the currency, I guess, among women is likability, agreeability. Also flexibility, because, working together, you have to have a bit more of a agreeable and fluid nature. This also gave women the ability to be more adaptable to change, which I think is a great trait to have in this modern day and age where technology is shifting things so quickly. Industries that are thriving in, one decade, the next decade, it's basically industries destroyed because some technological development. To basically hold on to this trait of fluidity and flexibility and adaptability. Yep. To me, like water, taking shape-shifting into what you need to be in each situation, which by the way, you still hold true to who you are, but by situation to situation, you can actually change how you present yourself. Yeah. So that's one aspect, intuition. So the difference between a male and female brain is that the male brain developed to be more tunnel vision. And the way this shows up is that, in the brain, there's gray matter and white matter. Gray matter, you can kind of think of it as like, processing centers. Data comes in, it gets processed. And then there's white matter, which basically networks all the different processing centers together. In men, when it's activated, the gray matter activates 10 times more than a woman. But on the other hand, for women, the white matter activates 7 times more than a man. And what this really means is all these different processing centers now are connected. So when people say a woman can multitask, there is some truth to that. Because basically what the activation of the white matter allows you to do is actually be able to connect between different contexts. This goes not in between different contexts and situations, but between emotions and language, like your emotion center and your language center. This is why so many guys, I have 2 boys, I know this, from experience, not only from my lovers, but my own sons, that they have a hard time articulating their emotions because our white matter is not as developed as a woman. So,
see, I love this because we tend to, so Alison Armstrong was on the podcast, and I think she's episode maybe 70, 69 or 70. And we talk a lot about this because in her book, The Queen's Code, there's this emphasis on men and women and how women expect men to show up like the perfect woman.
Yeah, exactly. Like Harry,
and it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And to recognize that and be okay with that. And the thing is, I think knowing this, like for example, he's not ignoring you when you ask him an emotional question. He just cannot elaborate. I mean, he can't really verbalize what he's actually feeling. This is nothing personal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but we take such offense to it. And so actually, from a man's perspective, and my husband, thank God, is just one of those men that, are constantly working on themselves and constantly trying to develop their white matter so he can communicate to me. I mean, that's their job. But our job is really just kind of seeing what they are and not creating drama over what a biological fact is.
Exactly. And so by just knowing this, by having the information, you can literally just take out that drama piece.
Right.
It's like, oh, wait, you're different. You actually absorb and process and express things differently than I do. It's quite simple when you break it down to biological terms.
Right. And on the conversation about emotions, that's another feminine trait. The masculine is rational, logical versus the feminine being emotional. Now, one of the eye-opening moments that I've had is in my spiritual journey. I met with this Taoist master, and she said to me, "Why do you keep stuffing your emotions?" Because like being spiritual, quote unquote, I thought that, I shouldn't get angry. I shouldn't get sad. I should be even keel, the middle way. And she said to me that there's so much power in emotions. There's so much wisdom in emotions that if you continue to stuff it like that and, trying to switch your state without really understanding the power coming through those emotions, then you're really losing so much. So from that point on, I really worked on redirecting the energy that you get from different emotions, like anger, for example. There's a lot of fire behind anger. And if you can channel it in a way, it can galvanize you into action, taking action to whether, change the situations that you don't like, leave a relationship that's not healthy, good for you, change your job, whatever it is. You can use that energy to work that way. We're on the subject of heartbreak. Heartbreak, and I think grief and sadness. Sadness, if you think about the emotion, like anger, for example, is outward, right? Most people, when they're angry, it's outward. Sadness and grief is internal, and it makes you introspective. So instead of resisting and fighting, when you resist and fight, these emotions just get bigger and bigger and it haunts you even longer.
Yep.
Instead of fighting it, embracing it, and actually really sensing and feeling what that emotion is bringing to you. In the case of grief, it's introspection and the ability to step back in the experience and get really grounded, which I think is really needed after, heartbreak and, a sad situation where a relationship didn't work out or somebody died or something like that.
A lot of self-care, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Like just
self-care going inwards.
Yeah. Well, and it was so beautiful. I have a new friend and she's from China. She moved to the States when she was 17. And she was telling me how when she's like, because I was feeling really sad the other day about something. And she said, "Oh, when I feel sad, I just feel sad. Like I feel sad. Like I just feel sad and I feel it all. And then like when I feel lazy, like I feel lazy. Like I just like, I'm there. Like when I feel happy, I'm there. I'm happy. I'm, in it. And I was just like, wow. She's like, like when I feel sad, I just cry. Like I just cry and cry and cry,
Right. Exactly. And I think that's beautiful. And then you can really embrace all the power behind those emotions and the wisdom behind it too. And like in Dan Goleman, emotional intelligence, I think the key is actually to own the emotion and understand that you're the master of your emotions rather than being enslaved by them.
Mm-hmm.
When you fight your emotions, you often become enslaved by your emotions. And this does not help you in your relationships, in your career, in any aspect of your life.
Yeah, yeah. And then when we're not allowing our experience to be and to dance with it and work with it and feel what's there, you end up with a lot of angry, vindictive people in the world who are resentful and, feel like they've been wronged and have regrets and feel rejected. And then you've got a really messy environment.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Lauren, you and I talked about this, but like to me, all of these societal issues, Me Too movement, this inclusion initiatives in companies, it's the solution is in the heart, not the head. We're trying to put programs together and policies together and blah, 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 whatever. But, at the end of the day, it's backfiring and creating more resentment, which is a sad part. The programs need to be heart-centered, whether that's mindfulness, wellness, some different kind of quote unquote education. But I feel like we're going about it all in the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what I'd like to offer is like, instead of making it about right and wrong, just like what actually works to support each of us in dealing with what's there, cleaning up the past so that we can create a powerful future that we're actually excited and energized to live into.
Exactly.
And really unify us as human beings on the planet, right? Because it's like we're all doing our best here to live in this life. And none of us, we don't really know what's going on here. It's like we're just here and we're in these bodies and we have all these energies and emotions and memories. And, there's just so much to being a human on this planet. And we're also hurling through space. We're in constant motion. And so it's like, what can we do to just get to homeostasis, to get grounded, to learn to love ourselves, to learn to love each other, and create and foster that within us that we desire to experience outside of us?
To me, 3 things that I do consistently: spend a lot of time in nature. The frequency of nature just has a way of, and I think there are scientific studies that have actually shown that just basically the vibration and the frequency from nature kind of regulates our emotions and hormones. So the concrete jungle that New York is, I try to get out as much as I possibly can, even a little patch of grass anywhere underneath a tree.
Oh, yeah.
And every weekend and trying to, make my way out further into the woods. So spending time by beach, woods, whatever, in nature as long as you can. That's 1. 2, any form of mindfulness, meditation, and that could be a walk. That could be a seated meditation. It doesn't have to be necessary. And there's so many different meditation techniques out there. Find one that works for you and just don't give up because, one particular technique didn't work, because there's so many different options out there. That's true. That's number 2. And then for me, last one is to dance. In fact, I actually met Peter at a moving meditation called 5 Rhythms. It's basically in an ecstatic dance class. And that's how I met Peter. And that's how I met my husband too.
That's so great.
My current husband, John, who you met. So dance, especially for women. For me, all the lessons of femininity can be taught when you can freely let yourself go and dance. Because it includes fluidity, includes a certain level of intuition, includes expressing your emotions. There's so many different aspects of dance that brings out femininity. Being comfortable and loving your body, being friends with your body to express how you feel inside. Opening yourself, being receptive to the vibration of music, feeling every single cell of your body come alive with the melody and the beats from the music. All of these things, receptivity is another huge aspect of femininity. So these are my 3 things: spend time in nature, meditation, and dance.
Ah, I love it. Suki, this has been awesome, lady. I am so grateful that we met and that we had this time together today, that we could share you and this conversation with the Ignite Intimacy community. And where can people find you online? Because you actually do coaching and, you work with people. So how can people connect with you to learn more about how you support others and then everything else that you're up to in the world?
Yeah. So you can find any information about one-on-one coaching and upcoming workshops and whatnot on my website at www.sukisohn.com. My name is spelled kind of funny, Suki. Last name is Sohn. About how to get in touch with me and any news. You can always subscribe to our newsletter so you can get updates, information, discounts, and all that kind of good stuff there. So
great. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat that. So it's www.sukisohn.com. It's S as in Suki, UKIS as in Suki, OHN as in Nancy.com. So sukisohn.com, and we'll have that link in the show notes. Suki, thank you so much for the powerful force that you be in the world and for being with everything that you went through and put yourself through to get to this point so that you can be a beacon of light in the realms of love and the heart and connection for our world. It's really powerful.
Thank you, Laura. It's an honor to be here with your audience, and you. It's great and fun chatting with you. So, and thank you for being a beacon of light and sharing all these ideas with the women out there on the subjects of love and intimacy. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you'd be surprised. We have a crew of men. Yeah, who tune in on the regular. And
That's great.
I actually just had an old friend message me and say oh my gosh, Laura, I have to tell you this episode with Kenya, I believe it was episode maybe 67. I did a back-to-back Rechem 1 week, and then Kenya, his wife, the next week. And, my friend was like, oh my gosh, that episode just opened me up to so many things for myself and my wife and our partnership. And it was so exciting to hear that the conversations are having impact, so, and that's why I'm doing this, it's, I want it to make a difference. I want it to open people up and have people think wow, I never thought about that, because we're creating possibilities here. So Ignite Intimacy community, thank you so much for tuning in again. Hop over to iTunes, leave us a review and a rating, share this with your friends, holler at us, hello@igniteintimacy.com. And you heard it here. We're talking about healing the heart and being open to the breaking that opens us up to really get to the heart of the matter. So we love y'all. Thanks so much for being here on the journey. And until the next one, stay blessed and ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.